Do you think this is going to be like all the other occasions where we've seen some degree of brinkmanship and actually finally they do manage to raise the debt ceiling and come up with some kind of spending bill?
Well, we certainly think that, as has happened every other time since the debt ceiling was instituted in 1917, that the debt limit will be raised. The question now, as you've rightly said, is how noisy the process is. In recent years, it's generally been pretty noisy, as I think you and your viewers know. The question now is whether the circumstances around hurricane relief change that. From a credit perspective, from a rating perspective, that political noise or the absence thereof is not particularly relevant. What's more important is that ultimately the debt ceiling gets raised.
What matters to you? Let's say actually that they struggle. You're saying the probability is actually that they don't, but let's say that they do. In terms of the way you approach their AAA rating and the outlook, because at the moment you've got it on stable, what matters? Is it maintaining debt payments, it's interest payments that are the critical thing for you in terms of the rating?
Well, with regard to this very narrow issue, yes, making interest payments is extremely important. And if interest payments were not to be made on time, there would be rating consequences for that, likely. And we published a report earlier today giving a little more detail on what that could mean. However, the broader drivers of the U.S. rating really have more to do about the debt trajectory, the ability of the U.S. to bring down debt in a sustainable way, and ultimately that goes to either some of the long-term spending commitments that the U.S. has made or the revenue flows to finance them.
And this is one of the big criticisms, I think, of the administration, and not just this one, of course, because they've not really had time, but of previous ones, is they've not done enough to tackle entitlement reform. Do you think that, from what you can see from this US administration, that actually they recognise the importance of tackling long-term debt sustainability and the deficit? Because the kind of jury's out on, even with the tax reform plan, whether it's going to be deficit neutral or not. The hope here is that growth will allow them not to be.
Well, and I mean, certainly we've expressed skepticism about the growth, the kind of growth numbers that the administration has discussed. And it's not politically popular in either party. And this is something we saw during the election campaign to try to address some of the entitlement issues. And ultimately, the question is really, either something gives on the spending front or something gives on the revenues that finance that spending. One of the things, as far as expenditures go, that we know is going to rise going forward is interest expenditures on the debt. And the trajectory of that is expected to rise pretty steadily over the coming years, which then creates further constraints on other kinds of spending or further demands for revenue to finance it.
Yeah.